Hi, and welcome to the Keys to Therapy. Today's guest is Annie. Hi, Annie.
Hey.
Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
All right. So my name's Annie. And I am an IFS therapist. So IFS is internal family systems. And I love working with therapists
Hmm.
doing IFS. And I also really love working with newer moms. Yeah. So
Ew, I like that though, because I feel like a lot of therapists need a therapist.
mhm.
So, and I feel like it's difficult to find one that works with other therapists. I think a lot of people get intimidated by that.
Yeah, well, and one of the worst things, and like as a therapist, I highly value therapy. I have my own therapist, and the worst thing that a therapist ever said to me is, "Well, what would you tell your client?" And I'm like, "I'm not here as a therapist. I'm here to be the client. So don't ask me those things in that way." So,
No, it
yeah.
pulls you out of it. You're supposed to be there with your therapist hat off so you can say whatever and do whatever and not.
Right, like, okay, because it's part like we asked the therapist part to have a seat next to you. Like
Mhm.
she or he does not need to be in the driver's seat during your therapy. So
No. Oof.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good what not to do
Yeah.
for anybody that wants to see therapists in the
Yeah.
future. Yeah, it can definitely be intimidating, but again, everybody needs one. So it's nice that you work with them and it sounds like you enjoy it, which is
I
exciting.
love it. I love it. There's a like a ripple effect, right? Like you do your own work, and then when you go in and work with your clients, it impacts how you work with your clients. And so um it's
Yeah.
super.
You get to help a lot of people by proxy then. Because
Yeah, I love it.
like you help the therapist who helps their clients who then go home and help their families and are better whatever roles they're in and it just
Mhm.
trickles
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
down. It's exciting. So with IFS, this I'm excited for this interview because I don't know anything really about IFS. I know IFS parts work. There's different parts. That's literally all I know about it. So I'm going to learn a lot today, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing as far as like the training that has impacted you the most throughout your career would probably be IFS. So can you explain maybe why you chose that one and maybe also explain a little bit about what exactly it is?
Okay, so a little bit of background to get to
Yeah.
how I connected with IFS. So I've never been like big on CBT. That's
Mhm.
always, I've kind of been like I can see some aspects of it that are useful, but as a whole, it's not my thing.
Mhm.
And so even in grad school, when you're in the theories class and they ask, "Oh, what theory?" And
Yeah.
everyone, I think there may have been one other person that raised their hand to CBT. I was one of the only ones that did not.
Wow.
And I was really struggling with like, where do I fit as a therapist? Because that did not resonate for me. The closest I could get was like some psychodynamic person-centered stuff, which still was not quite like, I was like, okay, I have to pick something and I got to incorporate some stuff. So that's kind of where I'm like going with it, but
Yeah.
it didn't really resonate with me. And this might sound kind of funny. And I didn't tell anybody for years because I thought people would think I was crazy.
Oh.
In my, in my internship, I was working with an individual who we actually discovered has dissociative identity disorder.
Hmm.
And what was interesting though is, while I don't have dissociative identity disorder, there was something about the work we were doing that was kind of resonating with me, like, oh, this person has these like different personalities or identities that would really come out, but there was no connection, right?
Yeah.
And there was something, and I was like, that I don't have that, and it's not quite like that, but there was something about that like there was a familiarity, but
Mm.
I didn't have language, I didn't have any of the conceptualization. So I just, of course, kept it to myself because I'm like, people are going to think I'm crazy.
Right. I love dissociative identity disorder. I can relate. Like, it
Right.
gets
Like,
tough to explain.
right. So then I believe it was like I was reading The Body Keeps the Score because,
Yeah.
okay, so I need to research trauma. I need to learn more. Trauma is huge, especially with DID.
Mhm.
And in the book, he mentioned something about IFS that piqued my curiosity. And I started like learning a little bit. And I'm like, that was it. So IFS is about the multiplicity of the mind. We are not a singular, like unified being, right? Just simply, it's 5 o'clock. Part of me wants to get up and go exercise, and part of me really wants to sleep in, right? So there's this internal pull,
Yeah.
tension, polarity, and something that simple. But then even big things like part of me wants to, you know, be a mom, and part of me doesn't want to have children. Ooh, hmm. How can I connect with both of these parts of me and really hear, understand, and honor what both of these parts of me are holding
Yeah.
to then make a decision, a huge life decision that's going to honor both of these parts. Where is that coming from? Where do I need to go? So, I mean, that can play out in our careers. Part of me,
Mhm.
there are parts of me that love this particular job I'm in with this agency. And part of me really wants to do this private practice thing because I've heard some cool things. And part of me is really, really scared. So
Right.
there's a whole bunch of parts that start coming up, right?
Yeah.
And then even as you venture into private practice, I'm loving this. I like this. Oh, I'm marketing. Something's getting in the way of me doing this. And if you can identify, maybe there's a part of you that at some point it was not safe to be seen,
Mhm.
right? And so you may unknowingly sabotage marketing, getting yourself out there, right? And so if we can connect in with that part of you,
Mhm.
because it's not just all of you, obviously, right?
Right.
So there's internal conflict, self-sabotaging, that type of thing. And IFS is amazing with getting into those little places. We're
Yeah.
big.
Right. And it's all, see, that's a concept that was never, for grad school, IFS was never discussed to me. Most of the like treatment modalities, it was like you said, CBT, solution focused, to like psychodynamic. It was all very old school theories and practices and lots of like homework worksheets, like
Yeah,
not necessarily helpful practical concepts for the
right.
most part. And so something like this that is so layered, I don't, I mean, maybe some programs are out here talking about it, but
There
most
are a few now that do mention it, but
good, but
yeah,
still not like as in depth. So,
yeah.
and it's still fairly, it's getting more popular, it sounds like.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what we learn in grad school is it's like the example I use, it's like taking a lawnmower to the weeds. Like
Mm,
and sometimes that's what we got to do, right? Like these, let's challenge negative thoughts. Let's do this. And we're using our brains. We're staying up here,
yeah.
right? And sometimes we got to do that. And sometimes we do that for a while and then we realize, oh, there's more. I need to go deeper.
Hmm.
And so IFS, and other things like somatic work, EMDR, those take us together. Those are called the bottom up
Mm,
therapies. And that's where we go and we dig down into the roots of those weeds. But we got to do it in a gentle way because then because there are things there that we don't want to get rid of. And if we just go in and, rip everything up, and so it's a delicate process. And we can go in and we can, oh, and now these weeds aren't growing like they were. Now there's fertile soil where I can plant things that are gonna flourish and bloom and be beautiful and thrive, right? So
yeah.
that's kind of the metaphor that I love for that.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense though, because I feel like grad school is very in a lot of ways what they teach you is very basic. Here's these basic framework theories, but it's kind of up to you once you graduate and decide more of like who you want to work with and what you like, what will serve those populations best. And not even just the populations, but what serves you, what calls you as a therapist. Because if you're not comfortable, like you were saying with CBT, if that's not something that fits with you, your therapy is going to come across like disjointed. If you're
Right.
pretending to be the CBT therapist, it's not going to come across like how it as authentic as maybe it could or should, because it's not authentic to you, which
Yeah.
I think is a great lesson for new therapists who almost feel like they need to go with the grain, or they need to go with like, well, all these other people really like this, or they're spending so much time in school teaching this, like there must be a
Yeah.
reason for that, instead of going, okay, that's great to have some of those tools, but what fits me? I think there's a lot of, I need to fit the system versus how do I make the system work for me?
Right. And the thing is, if it doesn't fit for me, there's other people it's not going to fit for either. Right.
Absolutely.
And, kind of as you're saying that, one of the things that I'm reminded of is how important it is to even be the client, right? So, like, you're interested in EMDR or CBT or DBT or these things. So, go find a therapist who does it
Mhm.
and be the client for a while. See how that feels for you as the client.
Yeah.
You're going to get a really good feel for, you know, do I like this? How is this impacting me?
Hmm.
And is that how I want my clients impacted?
Oh yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And there was something with like, so I did EMDR training a while, like a couple years ago, because everybody was doing EMDR training. And I was like, well, maybe I should be doing EMDR training.
Same.
So I spent the money on it, and I was like there for the 2 weekends. And as we were doing it, as the client, because you have to do all those role plays. So you're the client, and then you're observer, and then you're the therapist, and the trio keeps on doing each role. But I remember being like, "Oh, I don't really love this." Like, there's so many steps, and we had to have like the folder out and make the timeline. And there were certain things that for me, being the therapist and in some ways being the client, felt very formal for how
Hmm.
I typically practice. So in the training I had already paid for and committed to, I was like, this doesn't totally fit what I want to do. Like,
Yeah.
I like pieces of it, but this really isn't fully where I want to be. And it doesn't speak to my pattern. And I found as I was trying to then use it with clients after, most of the clients that had already been seeing me and were used to that style of therapy that was more conversational, casual, like they would bring in the goals. We would kind of just process, see where it would go, a little CBT, little, solution focused, but they were very much like, they would be open to it, but they'd be like, nah, I'm good. And
Yeah.
then want to continue with something else the next time.
Right.
So yeah, I think it can be very expensive to follow the trends and
Yeah.
not be worthwhile, because now it's like, all right, that's great. I have this, and maybe somewhere along the way, somebody will do it, or I can use pieces of it. But it
Right.
didn't speak to me. I did it because I thought I should. So
Yeah. For sure.
yeah. So it sounds like for you, there was maybe some things along the way that you were trying to try out, I guess. But
Yeah.
so what was it about IFS in particular that drew you to that? It sounds like there was something about it that felt like familiar and made sense to you.
Yeah. So it was like when I started with the concept of parts, like it was like it that tied back to my client in grad school, like in
Mm,
my internship. Oh, that's why there was something there. Like, so now I can say it and not feel like, oh, I was crazy. No, actually, there is something about the multiplicity that I was resonating with
mhm.
that was like, ooh, there's something here. I just didn't have the concepts, the language that now I can say, oh, I have parts too.
Mhm.
They just don't present that way. But sometimes, my a part like when I'm in a more playful space, my demeanor actually shifts a little bit. I'm more playful with my children, or I'm at the amusement park and like my kids are like, wow, you're like so fun. So that's another part of me that's expressed differently,
Yeah,
right? And I act differently in those spaces when those parts of me are more present and more active, and then that shows up even if I'm activated in a harder way, like I'm really anxious. There's a part of me that's really anxious, and you can tell I'm anxious because it has kind of taken the driver's seat, or
right.
and we're charging ahead with this anxiety. um and so that's kind of just how I've been able to then conceptualize and like that's why there was that familiarity. And so now I know I'm not crazy because of
Yay.
that.
Which is always always good news, right? When you find out like, oh, it wasn't me. Okay, good.
Yeah, there's a thing here, like,
Yeah, there's some
really a
validity.
thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Awesome. Well, what is IFS training like? Because all I know is that there's like a crazy lottery system
yeah,
and it can be kind of difficult to get into. But I'm
yeah.
curious about, what does the training look like? How long is it? Are there the role plays? Just kind of
Oh
give.
yeah. So I love being able to talk about this because actually in a couple weeks here I'll be I'm in my second opportunity as serving as a PA, which is a program assistant for the official trainings.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I get to help train now. And I love, love, love it. So I can so this is basically I'm almost done with the third level one. My own level one, I've PA'd a full level one and I'm in a second one. So I have a lot of knowledge and
Yeah.
experience with them. And so they are intense. The
Okay.
trainings are super intense. Typically 4 days over like 3 weekends, around 6 months. Some of them are during the week, just depending on, location, and most are online. They're starting to do some hybrid. So like there's I'm going to PA for a hybrid that's in Chicago coming up. So I'm going to spend 2 weekends in Chicago. One weekend is online. And then there's bridge days in between, which is like a 5 hour in between the modules, they call it.
Okay.
And it's, I think they've brought it down to about 80 something hours total for,
Wow.
yeah, for the training. And yeah, the lottery system is insane. It's hard to get into. And they're also working to try to train more trainers so that they can get more trainings, because so the way it is you have at least one lead trainer and an assistant trainer, and they're the ones that do a majority of the teaching and the in the big group setting. And there's typically 36 participants and then 12 program assistants, PAs, which is what I've done. And so we have the big group where there's teaching, there's demos. Participants can volunteer for demos where they'll have like a 40-ish minute session with one of the trainers in front of the whole group, right? So totally optional, but super powerful.
Oh, yeah. And it helps
Yeah,
to see it, right? But like you're learning it and then you get to see it and then you get to do it, right?
yeah. And then we have you have what they call a home group, which is two program assistants with 6 participants, and it's just a time to kind of, how are things going? Do you have any parts that need spoken for? And we learn how to speak for parts
Okay.
instead of parts, which is, and that group typically stays the same through the whole training. And then there are practice groups, and that's one program assistant for 3 participants. And typically we'll meet every day of the training and have space to practice, to try out being the therapist, try out being the client. And then you also get to be the observer, and the observer then gets to notice what's happening for them as they're watching.
Mm.
And it's space for feedback and learning, and we call it like playing in the sandbox. So you get to try it out and all of that. But they're long days. It's like you start typically 9 a.m. and you're going till about 4. You have an hour and a half for lunch. And so it's exhausting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Especially because then you're doing some of your own work.
Right. Because it's not just learning. That's the thing that people don't typically understand, is when you come into an IFS training, you're going to actually be like, it's going to activate stuff for you, which is how you learn how to work with parts. You got to work with your own parts.
Yeah.
So it's a very experiential learning process. And I hear a lot of people that come into the training is like, wow, I had no idea. I didn't expect it to be this intense. I was working this morning, or I have to see clients this afternoon. I did that when I took my level 1. Like mine actually was based out of the UK and it was online. So I finished at noon here, and I'm like, oh, I could see a couple clients in the afternoon. It was exhausting. So
you're like half dead because then you've been crying, you're watching other people cry. Everybody's going through their stuff.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But
Yeah.
so is there like a manual? Is there like a certain thing you have to follow?
Yeah. So they give you a manual, and don't have it right here, but so I mean it's just, and there are like certain steps that they take you through, kind of, you kind of have to have some sort of formula, but as you're learning it, then you learn how you don't follow it all the time, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, and there's, specific things that they're teaching you throughout the modules, as far as like, identifying parts and how to unblend from parts so that like, you're not just like, hey, I'm talking to this person's part, but that then they can connect with their own parts and, learn to build that relationship. And, yeah,
Wow. So
yeah,
it sounds a little bit like learning a new language in a
kind of.
sense, right?
It is.
Is now that you said parts, is there like different, almost like archetypes or something for different parts?
Yeah, so they kind of classify them in like, generally speaking, there's like protectors and exiles,
Okay.
right? And in protectors, you have managers and firefighters. And so those would be like, parts that say like managers would be like, I'm the super planner, I'm going to keep everything on schedule, but like very like, because I'm trying to make sure something never happens, like I'm taking a proactive stance, right? And then the firefighters are like reactive, like, oh shoot, this happened, we're going to put out the fire. Something got activated. So sometimes those present as addictions, as, alcohol, self-injury, even suicidal, parts of us that may like, I kind of like, don't like to say suicidal parts, but parts that maybe feel suicidal
Yeah.
because, may react in those ways. Like, I got to stop the pain. Think about an actual firefighter that comes in. They don't care about the collateral damage. They're just there to put out the fire.
Right.
And so the manager is going to like make sure the fire either doesn't start or stays contained in the first place,
Hmm.
you know?
Oh yeah.
And so the protectors, their job is to protect these exiles. And
Hmm.
these are the wounded ones, the parts that really hold a lot of the pain, the wounds, the sadness, those, um, and, and they're exiled because they were hurt. So we got to keep them locked away, keep them safe, keep them from getting hurt again. Right. So then the managers say, okay, I'm never going to let this happen again. So we're going to do, uh, I'm going to make sure everyone else is happy because this little one here, I never want her to get hurt again.
Yeah.
And then if she does get hurt, firefighter jumps in to make it all better, right?
Hmm.
So
Do you think, have you noticed with clients that having this language, like here's these parts, here's what they do you think that that would be really helpful, like for some of the ones who maybe don't really understand the feelings that they're having or push them away a lot? It sounds to me like it would be really helpful to have these things to like name them and categorize them in so they can conceptualize it better.
I think there's a balance too, because I
Okay.
think sometimes people get too focused on, they stay up here, like I'm going to think about it, I'm going to understand, I'm going to categorize, right?
Mhm.
Because what we want to do is drop into here and connect with and be with, and like these parts need to be seen and heard and understood,
Yeah.
and understanding, hey, when I feel suicidal, that's a part of me. That's not all of who I am. And
Mm.
that all of a sudden that feels less scary, right? Or like I want to hurt myself.
Mhm.
Well, but not all of me does. Like that's why I'm not doing it, right? Like
Yeah.
there's this internal struggle because there's a part of me that does and part or parts of me that don't.
Mhm.
And so knowing that, when I'm angry, it's not all of me that's angry. There's a part of me that's reacting in anger. And and it kind of just like, I don't know, it doesn't feel as big or as scary to me. And
Oh,
for my system, like, oh, like and even, people can come in suicidal. Okay. Yeah, let's really understand this part of you that is feeling really suicidal right now, because I know you're here, so not all of you wants to die.
mm,
Otherwise you wouldn't be here and you would already be dead,
yeah.
right?
Oh,
uh
that makes so much sense though, because I feel like for clients, Especially if they live in like the manager part,
Mhm.
probably aren't connected very much with any of the others.
No, and that can be really scary.
Yeah. I mean, that
Yep.
makes them feel out of control, I would think, if it's this
Right.
emotional.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things I love about IFS is we're we're never moving faster than what your system is ready for.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have a part that's afraid to go to those places. We're not going to those places until that part of you um feels safe enough to do that.
Hmm. So how do you
We're getting permission from these parts to go.
Mm. So it still keeps them in control.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because they can jump in at any point. I mean, people have dissociative parts. Things are getting too emotional. A dissociative part jumps in, and that tells me, okay, someone's not okay with with what's happening here. Let's
Mm.
pause, let's notice what's happening, and let's address the fear, the concern. And we're not going to push past parts to go to, yeah, you may have an awareness that, you have this little young part of you that was so hurt and wounded and needs something. But until we have permission, we're not going to blast past these protective parts that um, they've been working hard for years to keep that one safe, and just going there feels unsafe.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
we
that's
really have to build that safety.
right, and not re-traumatize.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So I bet
yeah,
that's really big, especially with different types of therapy unknowingly. If somebody's
yeah,
not really looking at all these different layers to this person,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I think a lot of things could potentially get missed.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
um and there are some therapies out there that do kind of, we're gonna that it very effectively pushes past protectors and gets to some of the exiled parts, and then there's a lot of backlash.
Mhm.
um, and not having that understanding can really cause problems.
Oh yeah, that's where you get the people who are re-traumatized, or they're like, I'm not going back to therapy, or they're
Eh,
completely against a modality, but it wasn't done right.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So,
and that's what I love about IFS is it's so gentle.
mhm.
It's like it's all about um consent,
Mhm.
which interestingly is not one of the 8 C's that there's the whole thing about the 8 C's of IFS, and I'm like, consent is missing because that's it. It's all about getting permission from parts to do the work. Um, and without that, because most of our trauma comes from we didn't have a choice, right?
Mhm.
Like something was done to us, or we were in a space where we didn't have choice. We didn't have the ability to say no, or if we did, nobody cared.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's super, super important that, especially in the healing work, that is foundational of not only the client's choice,
Mhm.
but within their system, your parts get to have consent or deny consent, right?
Absolutely. It gives them the power that maybe they didn't have in those other situations.
Right.
And you're a safe person who is listening and
Yeah.
who's allowing them to make those decisions for themselves. And then for some people, that may have been the first time they've been.
Yeah. Which is why I totally get when parts don't trust. Of
Mhm.
course, yeah, I don't expect you to come in here and just because I say I'm going to listen, or that I'm going to, you say pause and I'm going to pause,
Mhm.
that you don't automatically trust that. Of course not. So that's something that has to be built
Hmm.
in this space and in your own system.
Yeah. Well, how do you identify the parts? How does that work? Is it just a lot of like assessment and discussing things, or are there
So,
different exercises?
so a lot of it happens to just be, we do a lot of internal experiential, like sometimes we just start with what somebody's noticing in their body
Hmm.
and just connecting to a tension or a sensation, which may be physiological, simply physiological. Oh yeah, I'm kind of, my stomach hurts a little bit. But if we sit with that sensation a little bit, sometimes, oh, there's a part that's maybe kind of anxious,
Hmm.
or, you know, um, and as I've worked, I've noticed some anxiety often shows up in the stomach, right? That I feel sick to my stomach, I'm anxious. Sometimes it shows up as tension in the chest or in the shoulders. And as we go through these experiential pieces, people start to connect with parts. Sometimes people can visualize a part, sometimes they can't. It's really individualized. Everybody's journey looks a little bit different, but I do see similar flavors
Mhm.
throughout.
Oh, that's cool. So then as an IFS therapist, there's going to be things as time goes on and you get more comfortable with your style of it. There's going to
Yeah.
be more things you start to recognize and patterns. So I'm thinking of some of the newer therapists who maybe are really interested in this because they felt like you did. Like this
Yeah.
speaks to them where they're like, I don't want to do all the worksheets with CBT. Like that just feels like school. That doesn't relate to me or whatever it is. If this is something that really appeals to them, for them to know, it sounds like it's something that as you go through and use it more, you get more comfortable in the therapist role with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I remember after several months, even after my level 1, I would have that like worksheet with the 6 F's, and these are the healing steps there, like, because I wanted to make sure I was getting, I don't now. Like I just, it's I can intuit it more. Kind of like you said, learning a new language, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm learning, I'm translating, and now it's kind of been I feel more fluent in it, not 100%. I'm still learning. We're all still learning, but yeah, like it's one of the trainers I worked with. I love what she said. She said, IFS is a uh, modality of therapy. It's also a theory of personality, and it's a way of life.
Oh, wow.
So the way I see the world now, when I'm talking to my children, when I am talking to my friends, when I'm, out in public and someone, cuts me off in traffic, oh, I react. Oh, okay. You know, and even just noticing that, or noticing, oh, somebody got mad at me, that their parts are reacting to something, and
Mhm.
really it's about them and not me. And it's really helped me to be able to see that.
Yeah, and kind of separate yourself from the situations because some people internalize so much.
Right. Right.
So to be able to see, oh, I bet even watching TV or movies and stuff, at times you can like dissect it even more.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That'd
Yeah.
be kind of
So
fun. That should
yeah.
be your YouTube series. It's like watching people be like, here's the different parts. Oh, in this scene, this part showed up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that could be interesting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be really fun. But yeah, so with IFS, it sounds like for you, it's been transformative in what you do with your work and even personal life.
Personally and professionally, like I feel like in the last several years of IFS, like, I mean, I have my own trauma history, like
Mhm.
pretty significant. And I've had more healing in IFS than I have in over a decade of other therapy. Like
Wow.
it's just it because you're going to a different space. Like it feels like healing versus managing symptoms, right?
Ah,
Very different, you know, like
wow.
I'm going to tackle this symptom here. Like if you have, let's say, high blood pressure, right? Well, instead of like, hey, I'm going to take the med, I'm going to do this thing here to manage these symptoms. Well, what if we could heal it
Mhm.
by doing some of these other things? And now I don't have to manage symptoms.
Right. Oh,
Right.
that makes sense though. Yeah. Because again, I feel like for something like this, that it's mm, it's really unique, it sounds like, in how you approach clients, how it can approach different situations. And for some people, that's going to be what they've been searching for, just like you were this
Yeah.
entire time, personally and professionally. It sounds like it
Yeah.
spoke to you on both levels, which I
Yeah.
bet is going to help you be an even better IFS therapist, having done it yourself as the client.
Oh, and with this one, I don't think you can do it if you haven't like done your own work. Like
Mhm.
that's what people are realizing, even in the level 1. Oh man, I need to go find my own IFS therapist now, or I
Yeah.
need to really find a peer that we can practice together as we're learning this. So yeah, yeah.
Oh, I bet. Because you'll be talking about certain parts and be like, I think I got that part.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things we learn is that when we're working with clients, we get activated, right? We often call that like, I always get them confused. transference and
Yeah,
countertransference.
counter trend.
Yeah, yeah.
I know, yeah, but it's that thing.
But that's what it is. And we
Yeah.
spend like, that's one of the big things a lot of therapies don't teach us about is like what's happening for us when our clients are here and how do we deal with that in the moment.
Mhm.
Right. And IFS is huge with that. Like as the observers in the practice groups, what's happening for me as they're doing work. And as I'm practicing as the therapist, what parts are coming up for me and how do I work with my parts while they're here? And if I can't, what happens and how to navigate all of that. And so, um, because it's a natural, normal part of therapy,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. And again, that's something that pretty much, and you can tell me if your program was different, but I know a lot of therapists I've met and in my program, it was, I don't think anybody ever talked about how we were feeling or should feel. It was all about the client.
Because we shouldn't feel is what we're
Anything.
told.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're supposed to like come in with nothing, but
Yes.
that's not possible.
Hmm.
And in fact, I think that does a disservice to our clients because they don't get to relate with an actual human.
Yep.
You do that because we're in this space also, we're working with our parts as they're working with their stuff, but that also means that they're relating with an actual human,
Mhm.
which they get to learn to do in a safe space.
Yep.
Um, and I love one of the things I love about IFS is it's shifted the ability to repair when there are missteps, because we're going to have ruptures in relationship in the therapy space, right? Like I'm going to say something stupid or a part of me is going to get activated and react, and that could cause a rupture in safety,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of times what will happen is I'm never going back there. They just like, and so I try to tell clients, I'm like, if something doesn't feel good for you here, let's talk about it because I have parts too.
Hmm.
And then we get to repair that space. And like, I get to own that, yeah, I had a part that reacted here and I was not able to be with you in the way that you deserved. And just own that and say, how can we make this better moving forward? Like, hey, yeah, I'm aware of this and I've taken it to my own consultation, my own therapy. I'm working on that. And that's not your responsibility. I'm
Hmm.
aware of it. And, you know, so that's been one of the biggest gifts too, is repair, not only in the therapy space, but in other relationships.
Hmm. Oh,
We're
definitely.
not, we're not taught how to repair.
No, no, don't mess up. Like,
Yeah, or I'm saying I'm sorry is repair, and that's not there's more to it than that. So
absolutely. And like you said, that human component, especially because I know IFS could be used a lot with trauma. I'm sure it could be used with a lot of things, but I know a lot with trauma, like you mentioned earlier. And so, again, for some people, having those open conversations, somebody who's willing to admit, like, okay, here's what was going on with me, or, oh, as you're saying that, I'm reacting. I've seen a lot of therapists in some of the Facebook groups or things like that being like, oh God, I felt so bad. I started tearing up in a session with a client today. I feel so guilty. And it's like, but we hear horrible things. We hear
yeah.
sad things. And sometimes we're going to be human and react. And I think, I mean, I know I can think of one session I had in particular where I reacted. The client was talking about a dog that passed and showing me pictures and all these things. And I was like, oh my God, I can't handle the animal stuff. And so I was tearing up. And she said, I was so worried coming in here that you would think that this was stupid, that I'm here for grief over a pet. But your reaction is telling me that I'm with the right person. You get it. And so I was like, "Oh my gosh." But like you were saying, showing those human aspects of yourself, especially if somebody has vulnerable parts and they know you're human too and not this like person on a throne that's judging them, they're probably going to be way more open with you because of that human aspect and owning your parts. You're modeling that for them.
And it's a lot less work.
Yeah.
Like I notice a difference. Like and I still have some clients that don't get much into the parts work and like want to stay more over here, which is harder for me. It's more work for me to do some of that than to just be with somebody in their parts and to just like go into that space. Like I will have days where I just feel energized in
Mhm.
that space because it's like there's so much space and openness and just compassion, and that's energizing.
Yeah. And I tell some of the people that I've, mentored or talked to over the years, like as they're trying to figure out who their ideal client is or what modality works for them, or, those things that kind of make them as a therapist and that identity. Who do you feel energized with after you see them?
Exactly.
Which trends, ages, issues, what is it that you're like, oh, that was great. I had 5 clients in a row, but I feel really good about the work I did,
Yeah.
and which people are the ones that you're like, I feel like I was doing all the work, or I feel like I really had to push to
Mhm.
do or be something that maybe isn't supernatural to me. And it's a struggle. So that's a very good point to make sure that, you are aware of how you do your best work, and those clients will find you.
They will. They absolutely will.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, with IFS, is there certain books or anything specific that you think people who are interested in IFS in general should be reading or looking for?
So there are a lot of podcasts out there, IFS talks, what is it, the one inside, um, you can just Google internal family systems podcast and you can hear a lot of really great information. There
Yeah.
are books, some of them are more clinical in nature. Um, and the IFS Institute website has a lot of good resources too. I mean, as far as like articles and that type of thing. And that's where the official trainings are. There are trainings that are not official. Um, and you do the level with this. So there's 3 levels in the IFS trainings. And so the level 1 is, kind of the first step. And then level 2, there's lots of different topics that
Oh,
there's like trauma and neuroscience, there's addictions, there's children and families, there's one that's called like deepening and expanding, there's shame, anxiety, and depression. So there's lots of different ones within there that you can take. And then there's a level 3 that's just a more in-depth um, training, right? So I've done several level 2s. I've actually done 2 level 3s, and now getting to serve as a PA. So you know that being said, those are hard to get into, right? Like
yeah.
we talked about that at the beginning. So there's other things like the IFS Institute has like the online circle, which they do a lot of the educational piece, but it's online and it's a and there are I think twice a month they have like a live teaching question answer sort of thing with that. But there's no experiential piece to that.
Mm.
There are other trainings out there that do offer experiential stuff and kind of an intro sort of thing. And those type of things, even the online circle, if you've completed, I think you can call yourself IFS informed, but not like an IFS therapist or IFS trained.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and those vary in cost and in time and in quality even, right? So, um, I think it's important to understand, the person you're actually working with, like what experience do they have?
Yes.
Do they
Absolutely.
just come out of their level 1 and now they want to like share what they learned, or, have they done a lot of their own work? Have they um, continued to be in their own consultation groups and learning from others in that capacity?
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So, somebody who has completed only a level 1 can be an amazing IFS therapist. And I think that's something, there's also IFS certified, which is a whole different piece. Um, and there can be people who are not IFS certified who are amazing, people who've only done a level 1. And so it's really, you know, individualized. Like, so if you're looking for an IFS therapist, always, I think it's just a great idea to talk to them, have a consultation. It's
Mhm.
always a red flag for me if they won't have a consultation with you too, because I feel like it's important to get a feel for them, be able to ask questions um, before you invest a bunch of time and money
Oh,
in
yeah.
working with them.
Oh, absolutely agree. Even just for my clients, I do a consultation because I don't
Right.
want somebody on private pay. I don't want somebody paying an entire session fee for me to be like, yeah, I can't really work with that. and
Right.
refer them out. I think it's good to get that feel for that person before you sign up for services, because I would think, especially with something like IFS, you're going to be starting out with some pretty deep work and you're planning on doing deep work. So you want to know the person can handle it.
Right. Yeah. And that's yeah, like I feel like IFS therapists are more open about some of that too, of like um and not that other therapists can't be, but I've just noticed there seems to be a more acceptance of like, hey, I'm human and I'm, I tell people and I'm gonna mess up and we get to talk about it. And if something happens and I'm not quite sure how to deal with it, I have people that I can consult with. And I'm not afraid to go and like I continue monthly consultation at least. I will be in my own consultation groups because I value that space of learning from others who are doing it and building my skill and my experience with it.
Yeah, which is amazing. And it goes to show too, I think, for the new therapists watching, like learning is ongoing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I've been licensed. I'm licensed, I'm licensed in 4 states and, telehealth provider in Florida as well. And like, I don't have to do supervision or consultation, but I can't imagine not. Like, it's, especially when you're in private practice, like, you don't want to do this by yourself. Like,
exactly. You have to have some team, somebody, even if it's like one other person that you're like, okay, I need to talk through this case with, but obviously a group would be better. And with something like IFS, where there's so many nuances to it, and it sounds like so many different ways you can use it, you want to be able
yeah.
to bounce ideas off of people who get it and speak that same language.
Yeah. And people who, and like, I love that like, I have people I can go to consultation with when around, either somebody who has a sex addiction or was impacted by that. And I'm struggling in that area, but she's specialized. And so I can connect with her
Yep.
and, or somebody who, works with addictions in a different capacity. Like, okay, that's their strong suit. And I just like, you know, I get to kind of wrestle with some of that space versus, just different areas that maybe I'm less familiar with, but it doesn't mean I have to refer this person out because we're doing parts work. I just need a little guidance, right?
Mhm.
And if it becomes evident when I'm in consultation that, oh yeah, I think they do need somebody who has a lot more like skill, like neurodivergence,
Right.
right? There are some people who really specialize in that in IFS,
Mhm.
and I'm just learning about that. So I would be upfront with somebody who comes in and that's not my specialty.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm willing to seek out support if I need it, if it impacts. And if that feels like something that you can't work with or you don't want, or if at some point it feels like, hey, I want to make sure you're getting what you need and I'm not providing it, then we'll have that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's again important, I think, for new therapists to know, because I was never told that.
Yeah.
It was, you're going to work with people. And then to work in community mental health, where you kind of have to work with whoever comes in the door, it
Yeah.
was, there was no option for me to
Yeah.
refer out. And I've heard that from almost every person I've spoken to.
Yeah.
Like, referring out wasn't something they heard till like years later in their
Right. And even as you say that, it comes back to like the foundation. What I feel is the foundation of IFS is consent and choice.
Yeah.
Like even for us as clinicians,
Mhm.
um, we get to we we should be able to have choice in who we take on our case. And obviously there are constraints, and I know that's not always possible. And sometimes we end up with somebody who we're like, oh, now I have to figure out how to refer out. Yeah.
Which is tough, but it shows too. I think there was kind of, I think a lot of people have this, when I get to a certain point in my career, whether it's this many years licensed or this many years I've been in this setting or whatever else, that you're going to be good. But there's always learning. You're
Yeah.
always going. There's always going to be something else, that something comes across your way that you don't know, or you want to know more about, or training that you're like, this is it. So,
What I love also, just because I love working with therapists, is I see therapists who are new and who have been in the field for 20 plus years,
yeah.
and they still feel like I'm missing something, or I'm not quite like, it's like there's always something to learn, and there's always more growth and more like, and we have parts of us that sometimes feel like we don't know what we're doing, and that imposter syndrome. And those are parts that we can work with in therapy too.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah, and I feel like it's like you start to get to a certain point in your career where you're like, "I got this," and then you go to a new setting or you take on a new thing like private practice or something, and then you're like, "Okay, back to the drawing board." Like, figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, but I love that you're so open to learning, and the fact that you work with a lot of therapists too shows it's nice for people, I think, to hear from multiple stages of a career. There's always going to be learning, there's always going to be work to do personally and or professionally, and that's
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, if you think you don't need to grow, that's a problem, right? Like,
Definitely.
I mean, I know we get those points where we're feeling confident and I've got this and stuff, but that doesn't mean I still can't grow, right? Like if I'm like, nope, this is perfect, I've got it just right, like everything fits into my formula,
Mhm.
that's what it's like to me because, you know.
Right. That's when something comes through your door. Some consult happens, some big life crisis, something happens, and you're like, just kidding. So it's okay to know that like you're gonna be learning throughout your career. There's going to be things that, I feel like one big lesson I pulled from what you said today was you just because you're given certain things doesn't mean that that's all it's going to be. So like if these are the tools you learned in grad school or at a certain job you're at, seek out something that fits you because if that doesn't fit you, you're never going to feel like that
Right.
imposter syndrome is going to go away. You're always going to be pretending to be the
And
type of
it's always going to be a lot of work when it doesn't, when it's not congruent with who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So being able to find what works for
And
you.
and for some people that is not IFS,
Mhm.
right? Like for some people that doesn't fit who they are and what, and parts of me say, well, that's because they're, they haven't really
I was just thinking.
experienced it like
Yeah.
in a transformative way. But I can also respect that there are other needs and other modalities, right? Like not everybody's ready for IFS either.
Mhm.
Some people need how um, visualize it as like they need to mow some of those weeds for a while so they can get into a space where then they can come into IFS.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. And we need people that can do that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it makes me think about
Uh,
EMDR, how like you don't jump into the reprocessing. You got to do all that resourcing first. And so maybe for some people who are still up here, like you were saying, they need more of that CBT to have some of these skills, or they need some solution focused things to clear some of the spaces that they have in their lives that maybe could be running better. And it's a process to maybe work towards this. And even with IFS, it sounds like you've been able to use it interchangeably with some other stuff too. Like that might be the primary modality, but you're also pulling some pieces from different things as well.
because not everybody that comes in is ready for it.
Yeah, and they might need to, like, slowly work up to it.
And I even get people who's come in saying, yes, this is what I want. And we start working together and it's clear that we're managing some crises right now. Like there's a lot happening and your external world is not allowing for you to go into some of this deep healing, and that's okay.
Yeah,
And so, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Well, for our audience, is there anything that you're working on or anything that's coming up potentially for you that maybe you
yes.
clue us in on?
Yeah. So I have a couple things in the works as far as outside of, individual therapy. Um, I'm going to be starting in the fall some group therapy groups for IFS. Um, and then I'm also looking into doing like a kind of a beginner consultation group for therapists specifically interested in IFS, wanting to get some experiential, some education, not like a training, but kind of that space where, hey, we can learn this model, learn about it, practice on each other, kind of learn some of the basic skills.
Mhm.
Um, and, kind of, is this really something I want to do type of thing, like, let me feel it out a little bit. How do I like it? Um, and then I'm also working on a retreat for therapists.
Yay.
Uh, do some fun stuff, IFS, kind of touch into our own healing in that space, and connect with other therapists who want to do the same. So
Oh, that's amazing. And I think for what you were saying with the consultation group would be so helpful because with the lottery system the way it is, it may be, I mean, a couple years sometimes before somebody could get into that level one training, but that doesn't mean that they should be limited with the knowledge from.
right. And the great thing too about doing something like that, and there are other people out there that are doing it, but is that when you're doing the group, you're also connecting with other therapists who are doing it. And as you feel like, oh, hey, like that's somebody I could refer people to. You're building these relationships
Yeah.
with other people who are doing the same thing. And hey, they might be in another state, but they might hear from they might be able to refer to me. I can refer to them. I also have a resource and somebody who knows what's happening and
Yeah.
get some consultation. And I can't call myself an IFS therapist or IFS trained, but people know that I know IFS and
Hmm.
can utilize parts work in that way. And I'm IFS informed. And that can be really helpful too, like just in that space of a consultation group setting, over just therapy. Although I highly recommend, if you're interested in IFS or any other modality, I think I said that before, is find a therapist who does it,
Hmm.
try it.
Oh yeah, because that's the best way to sit in that client seat and feel it out. But yeah, and as somebody, as people are coming in like up in their career and they're newer, they're probably not always going to be making the type of money or have the type of support at their current positions to be able to pay for some of these big trainings. But this could be a great. Go ahead.
One of the great things is the IFS Institute does have scholarships
Oh,
available. Yeah, yeah. So, and particularly for BIPOC, they've made some, they
nice.
actually have some specific trainings for BIPOC and LGBT that
Oh,
they've, yeah, they're starting to do some of that. Um, so, but they do, like, you have to actually sign up and pay your deposit and all of that while you're applying for the scholarship. So it's kind of, you don't know ahead of time. But that's available.
that's
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so there may be some other resources too that are there. And I think for people who maybe are curious about it or and aren't sure if they want to commit to the full, because you said it's multiple weekends and hours and you know,
And yeah,
yeah. So something maybe in their current job they can't do that, or like I said, financially or whatever is going on. So I think a consultation group like the one you were describing is like a really good way of like getting your foot in the door to this
mhm,
theory and understanding more about it, being able to practice it, and then seeing, if it's something you really do want to pursue on that type of level, or if what you're getting out of the consultation group is enough, or even both, right? Yeah. I mean, there's
right.
no reason you can't do level one and continue with this consultation group.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things too to just keep in mind is with the trainings and consultation groups as
Mm,
opposed to therapy is if you are your own business or a 1099, those are business expenses,
true.
right?
Mhm.
So you're paying for that from your business and there's tax implications. Also, if you have an employer, they may be willing to pay part or all of a training or consultation group, right? So
Yeah.
being able to have those conversations, whereas therapy, that's therapy,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that's cool because I think that that offers people some other options as well because maybe they're out of practice or they're at an agency where nobody's trained in that. And that would
Yeah.
be really appealing and that would benefit the company. So
Right. Yeah. So present to your supervisor how this could benefit the agency or the company if I'm trained in this, or I'm seeking out this particular.
yeah, resource and education, that would be great. So yeah, get to that letter writing and sell it because we're saying says no, and then you pay for it
Right.
on your own anyway. But maybe they'd be willing to like give you half or something.
Yeah.
Um, But that would be great. So I'm going to link everything, your website, everything below. And as these things pop up, we'll add the links. They can check on your website, in the next few months or so. Yes. Yeah. Email list, everything to kind of keep up to date with what you're doing. And also, like you said, potentially even reach out if some.
Yeah. And if somebody is interested in either therapy or consultation groups or the retreat stuff that, they're welcome to go to my website and even just schedule a consultation. And meet with me for 30 minutes on Zoom. And, what are you looking for? What are you needing? And would this be a good fit for any of those spaces?
Absolutely. And that's so great that you're offering all of that because again, I didn't know much about IFS. So this has been exciting for me because I'm asking questions I want to know. So I appreciate you humoring me.
No, I love it. I love sharing this. It's like, it's my passion,
Yeah.
right?
You can tell though, as you talk about it, which I think says a lot too. You know, as you're discussing it, you light up. And so it's like, yes, that's awesome because then it shows it's the right fit. And I hope that other therapists watching see that, that it's not like, well, CBT does this or DBT, the manuals, you know, when you're just like given this routine explanation for everything, like you feel energized talking about it.
I definitely do. So I really appreciate you giving me this space to share it with you and with, you know, your audience and all of that.
Yay. And I hope that they learn a little bit like I did today.
Yeah, yeah. And
Exciting.
like you said already, and like I've said, is if they have questions, they can reach out. I love talking IFS. So
Yeah, perfect. And I'll put all your information below. So thank you for taking the time to be here today.
you're very welcome. Thank you.
So for the audience, if you guys want to follow everything Annie's doing, links below. If you want to subscribe to my channel, see what's coming up, do that. I also have a new Facebook group for therapists. That links below as well. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.